Alrighty.
Are we ready?
We are ready.
All right. For a rarity for the Super Number One Cycling Podcast, I can say good morning to you.
I know,
And it's a very rare occasion. But here we are, and it is Sunday, December 28th, and this is episode 18. And welcome aboard. Andrew, because of the topic that we are going to discuss in a very short period of time, I would like to go straight into this week in alcohol. And I can do this because I've been up since like 4.
That's right. It's acceptable.
So I'm not totally weird. This week in alcohol. Although I do have to say, I don't judge anybody who drinks beer in the morning. I mean, really.
They don't make a breakfast stout for nothing.
That's right. Exactly. But I am not having one of those. What I am having is from Summit Brewing Company, which is right here in St. Paul, Minnesota. And their Saga IPA.
Ah, yes.
This is a really nice drinkable IPA. One of the reasons that I like this one is that they changed their recipe from what it was initially. Right when it first came out, it was very bitter, really bitter, and I didn't much care for it. They changed the recipe, or at least I think they did. I really don't have any data to back that up, but it tastes different now, and it's good. It's a straight IPA. There's a lot of citrus in it. Nice bitterness, clean aftertaste. Not a lot of drying of the palate or anything. It's a good solid IPA, and it comes in cans, which is great for biking. So go out, pick up a Saga. And the reason that I'm having Saga today, or I guess if I want to tie it in, is that we had a bike ride on December 13th with people who were brave enough to come out with us to the Minnesota River Bottoms Trail. And that, by the definition of saga, which is a long story of heroic achievement, especially of medieval prose narrative in the Old Norse and Old Icelandic. But I'm focusing on the long story of heroic achievement. And that is definitely what everyone who came out on the ride definitely did, because it was balmy.
Like, to say the least.
50?
It maybe even got up to 50 that day. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
high 40s.
Warm, crazy warm. And the trails were feeling it. So well, first of all, thank you to everyone who came out on the ride. It was a big success for us for the first podcast sponsored, quote unquote, ride.
Right.
A lot of people came out. Thank you to everyone. I'm sorry to Scott for being shorter than you expected. That I can't do much about that. But he expected me to be, well over 6 feet tall. No, I'm well under 6 feet tall. So
less elf,
Scott.
more dwarf.
Yeah, it's like I am the Gimli to Andrew's Legolas. So there we go. But anyway, the trails were, I don't know, Andrew, how would you describe the first mile of trails? I have one word for it, but let's see what you come up with.
Glacial, perhaps.
Glacial would be good. I was going with treacherous.
Yeah, that would be accurate as well.
Yeah,
we sort of got a full taste of everything, of kind of 3 seasons at least of 3 seasons of. Hold on one second. I don't know what's going on here. Video is turned off. No, it's not.
Yes, mine did too. That's weird.
Okay. Thanks, Skype.
Yeah. Had a nice flow going there, Skype. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Skype. We definitely had a good 3 seasons worth of experiences, starting with ice, moving on to mud, moving on to, wet sand. It was all there.
Yeah, it was quite the experience. Very resilient riders we had with us. So many people took a tumble on that first section, and luckily nobody got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's bikes got bashed up too badly. So that was all well and good. But then we turned straight into, I would say, the deepest mud I've ever ridden a bike in. I was really impressed by everyone who rode tiny tired bikes, because even the fat bike was having issues.
Yeah.
So it was. I mean, and there were sections where it was at least 4 inches deep, at least, and it was pretty crazy. A lot of fun though. I mean, that is a trail that is definitely worthy of revisiting in every season just to check it out, because there's a lot of interesting riding happening on the Minnesota River Bottoms. Please don't pave it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's really interesting to see how the terrain changes down there. Like during Thanksgiving, I was down there, and in contrast to our December experience, when I was down there for Thanksgiving, it was like 0 degrees, even creeping in the negative digits when we had initially rolled out, and we had a good, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 inches of snow down there. And, it was much more uniform because of, everything was frozen solid, and there was no ice because it was all, just fresh snow that was hard packed down by other riders, particularly fat bikes and stuff. And that was a lot of fun too, because unlike, our experience where you're sort of fighting the conditions, you just kind of rode and went fast and had a good time. And, you would slip out, especially on my cross bike from time to time when you hit, somewhat slipperier conditions. But by and large, it was just, down there riding. Whereas in the summertime, I've been down there, both in muddy conditions and also dry conditions. And it's just every single time can be a completely different riding experience.
Yeah. And I am really looking forward to doing that in dry conditions, because the level of what you can do, I mean, there's long sections where it's just double track and kind of just enjoy the scenery. And then there are areas where you're getting into semi-technical single track.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty fun, to have that kind of variety in one trail system. That's just really great. And we met some people who were having some sausages on the trail, and that was cool.
As you do.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I mean, that's the kind of place where it is, where you just stop and, hey, we're going to build a fire here and, sit back and relax and enjoy. And that's pretty great. Saw a beaver.
We did see a beaver. Did see a beaver. A very large beaver.
Not that kind of beaver. Yeah. A real one.
The kind that uses dams.
Well,
but it's always been kind of fascinating to me, the culture of sort of camping out and having a campfire down there, sort of hobo style, just as you please. I'm going to build a fire. I guess part of my reason for that being so weird is, growing up in California and places where forest fires were huge dangers. You never ever would just build a random fire, because just you're gonna burn down an entire forest and people's homes. And so it's like when I see people do that down in the river bottoms, every single time I'm like going, are you sure you should be doing this?
Well, in a floodplain right next to the river is probably pretty safe.
Yeah, exactly.
And also I've never, even in Rochester, it's a pretty common thing to see people going on a bike and then starting a fire somewhere. And I would say that the cycling culture, by and large, is very respectful of nature. And they pack out their trash and they put their fires out very well.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that, keep that in mind. If you are going to be one of those people, please do both of those things.
Exactly.
But yeah, it was a really great ride, but there were some casualties.
Certainly were.
There were. And it wasn't, I think we lost quite a few of the riders about at the halfway point who decided, enough's enough. Mm-hmm. And wisely took off. And then it was just 3 of us left, and we continued on. So by the time we got to the end, Andrew, you had no brakes.
But by the time we got to the halfway point, I had no brakes. Even before then. And again, on my bike, I am riding on the Avid BB5 disc brake system. And I had, since state championships, cross race, replaced the front pads because I was, basically without brake pads on the front, but the rears were sort of the originals. And still, as far as I knew, had some pad left on them. But just grinding through both sand and mud, it was a shocking thing to sort of experience, just, starting with brakes and then ending with nothing.
Zero brakes,
and I don't mean just, oh yeah, I'm having a hard time stopping. I would slam the lever, and I was even adjusting the cable tension, and there was nothing there.
Yeah.
Which was exciting to say the least. So
yeah. And, some of that, cause we did inspect the pads on the end of the ride, and there was still some pad there. So it might've been adjustment issues.
And I think too, they just probably got contaminated and
just gummed up with mud and
exactly.
stuff. And that's going to do it.
But it was kind of fun to, there's a section that's sort of, if you're familiar with River Bottoms ride at all, closer to the Lindale, if you're moving from east to west, towards the Lindale side of the River Bottoms ride, there's this section down there that it winds through the trees. Absolutely love it. It's like my favorite part of the whole trail system. And
sandy single track that's just super fun.
Yeah, it's rolling. It's got little, rolling berms. You cross streams over wooden bridges. You're just kind of weaving in and out of trees. And you saw me at one point where I was coming around the corner, and not having brakes is not as bad in these conditions as it might seem, because you are going pretty slow, and also in muddy, sticky sand, you are going pretty slow. And if you stop pedaling, you can slow down reasonably quickly. But
you did a really nice over the handlebars dismount.
It was beautiful, wasn't it?
It was beautiful. Think, I mean, you ran it out. I mean, you didn't endo. That was pretty great.
Yeah, just couldn't stop. Was coming towards a tree, and I instead of, looking away from the tree and trying to turn out, no, I was like looking at the tree going, ah, and just somehow just went, did a little nice gymnastics, over the handlebars, dismount, and a little jog, and ta-da.
That was nice. I mean, it was a good place to do it too, because it was right in front of a bridge where it could have been bad. So, and then later it was bad for you when you, I think it was the same bridge.
No, it was a different bridge, but I ate shit pretty hard, because turns out when you cover really old worn wood with mud, it turns into ice basically.
Yeah.
Very
more
slick,
or less.
very slick.
Yeah, very slick. So on the ride, everyone was having issues with their mechanicals because just the mud and the gunk and everything was just
horrendous,
brutal. It was brutal to bikes. Everybody was covered in mud also, I should say. I mean, it was literally like, hey, let's go roll around in a pig wallow because, hey, why not? It's about the same level of muddiness. Even with fenders, that was the crazy thing. Fenders made no difference.
Yeah.
It was like,
there was one guy riding with us who had full fenders, and it was actually
he looked okay.
Remarkable how clean he was. But the rest of us, fenders were just like a suggestion that someday, they might, function if there's no dirt. But
right. Yeah.
These fenders were overwhelmed.
Oh, quite overwhelmed. Full fenders. Yeah. You were the smart dude for the day. But so we get to the end of the ride. I had been noticing on the last, 5 miles of the ride, when we got to stuff where it wasn't quite so muddy and we were riding on roads back to the origin point. I'm like, man, I'm pedaling really hard, and for a fat bike, even I'm pedaling really hard, even just trying to keep up with you guys, and you guys were outdistancing me by like a quarter mile. And I'm trying to work, I just can't, and I'm like, man, this is not good. So we get back to your place, Andrew, and wash off the bikes, which was a task all by itself. Wash ourselves off, which was something else.
Which was also very cold.
Cold water. Yeah. There's a lot of shrinkage going on. Wash, do that whole thing. And then I let the bike, sit overnight and whatnot. And then the next day, brought the bike home and turned the cranks on my bike. And the bottom bracket sounded like this. Sounded very bad. It was horrible. By the end of that day, once I had taken the bottom bracket completely out of the bike, the bottom bracket would no longer turn anymore. It was completely frozen. So goodbye bottom bracket. Brake pads also severely worn. I haven't had to replace them, but they were very worn. I had to wash them off and kind of get the crap out of them and everything. Had to go through the entire brake system to get all the gunk out. So I figured, okay, bottom bracket replaced. That's not so bad of a thing to replace. For my particular fat bike, though, it's an issue. For the frame fat bike, I couldn't find anywhere locally or even online the same bottom bracket that I had in there before. So I ended up buying a different one. Fine. It was an upgrade. So I'm like, yeah, I don't really want to spend the extra money, but it's an upgrade. I have to do it eventually. Do I want to ride my bike this winter? Yes. So bite the bullet, do it. Got the bottom bracket, came with cranks and another chainring system, which I'm like, okay, good. Cause this came with a 36-22, which is like the standard fat bike ratio. And I'm like, okay, well, that sounds good. So put that on. The bottom bracket that went in there with the cranks that came with it, which is an FSA, nice cranks, good bottom bracket, everything's great there, but it changed the chain line a little bit. Now, for those of you who might not know, I mean, the chain line is basically just like the angle at which the chain connects to the cassette in the back of the rear tire. Like that can change if you change your bottom bracket or chain rings or anything like that. So what I noticed is when I changed that, my front derailleur was rubbing on the chain when I was in. It needed its limit screw adjusted. So I'm like, all right, that's no problem. Easy adjustment. Well, the river bottom takes its toll again by the front derailleur limit screw completely seized. Like it not moving. It's not moving. You cannot get this thing to move. So I tried all the techniques I know to try. Heat, cold, put a soldering iron just on the bolt just to try and get it to, heat up and maybe break loose. No. Really trying really hard not to strip this thing out, because if I do that, then it's like, well, throw it away, basically. So trying. Sadly, yes, it's stripped.
Oh, shit.
Done. Okay, so like, awesome. And I had been really patient with this. I wasn't doing the thing that some people do and I normally do, where you're like, just try really hard and then you strip it.
Right.
I'm like, no, I was like being really patient, washing it out, adding, penetrating oil, like the whole thing, trying to, like, I do not want to ruin this. Well, it got ruined. So it still might be savable. I haven't completely given up on it yet. But what ended up happening is that I've taken the front derailleur just completely off, taken the shifter off, all of that now. So now I'm running a 1x9 with a race face chain on the front, or a chain ring, which is a 30-tooth narrow wide chain ring. So narrow wide just means that it won't drop your chain, basically.
Right.
So I ran it yesterday as a 1x9, and honestly, I kind of like it. So I don't know if I'll actually go back to a derailleur on that bike. We'll see. I might just change chain rings around as the season goes. We'll see. But yeah, so what that comes to with this long thing of all the trauma that my bike took in this is winter bike maintenance. There are many things you can do to avoid the Kevin situation that the River Bottoms did. Now, first thing I will say, though, is that if you ride in those conditions, yeah, your bike's going to take a beating. There's just nothing you can do about that. If you want to ride in that, it's going to happen. So just be willing to, know that.
Right.
That's the first thing.
And I mean, it is definitely a huge trade-off, and a certain amount of luck goes into it. And it sucks to blow out, parts of your bike, but at the same time, it's like, oh, those conditions are just amazing and so much fun to ride in. And
they were fun. Yeah.
And for me, having, kind of ridden in very similar conditions in cross races, I just kind of have accepted the fact that, like, if I'm going to race, stuff's going to get broken, especially, in racing where you're crashing and all that sort of stuff. And so it's just kind of like, if you're going to play, you have to pay sometimes, which is too bad, but, yeah.
Well, the problem with fat bikes, and this is one of the things, is that they're really built for this kind of conditions, like really soft, wet conditions. And it wasn't a fault of the bike that these things happened. It was just conditions, took their toll on parts that were already a year old. So they had taken a winter of use already.
Right.
And then they had this happen as well. Now, the other problem also is that fat bikes, unlike regular mountain bikes, cross bikes, road bikes, are still a relatively newcomer into the bike scene.
Right.
And so parts aren't as standardized as they are for other bike styles. So when you get to your local bike shop, they'll say, okay, what kind of fat bike do you have? And you say, I have a framed Minnesota 2.0. And they'll go, okay, that's well, they'll say, okay, that's 100 millimeter bottom bracket, right? And you'd be like, yeah.
Right.
Okay. But this is the one that came out of it. Can you get me the one that came out of it? I'm like, no. And so you end up having to basically upgrade from what that bike had. Now, like if you're riding a Salsa, a Surly, Borealis, any of those other bigger name fat bikes, you're going to have a much easier time to get the exact same bottom bracket that you had in there.
Right.
It's more expensive, but yes, you can get that same thing, and it's not going to mess up your drivetrain and all that, the chain, all that, blah, blah, blah. So that's just one thing to think about with a fat bike as opposed to a mountain bike or anything else, is that be aware that if you are riding a framed, let's just say, or a like a Cooker or a Motobacan or any of those that are kind of like the lower end of the fat bike market, you may have a harder time finding parts.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't say. Maybe your local bike shops are more replete in their fat bike stuff than mine are. But
and that's one of those things too, that if you find parts that you might need, especially harder to find ones, if you just keep an eye open for them and
it might be worth stockpiling.
Buy them up when you can.
Not a bad idea.
I do it with other things. Like if I just see, a ridiculous deal on tires or chains. I haven't done it with chains yet, but I'm going to start doing that. It's just like, things that are gonna need replacement on your
Yep.
bike. I usually like to, if I can, if it's reasonable, get a few extras, just because it's like, it really sucks when all of a sudden you find out you need something like brake
And you
pads,
don't
for
have it,
instance,
yeah.
and you don't have it, and you're kind of hosed. And in a lot of cases, like for instance, just recently, when I had to replace my brake pads after this ride, I went to the bike shop that I always take my cross bike to, and they only had one set in stock. So I was like, okay, well, I'll take this set. They'll get new ones in, of course, but
Yeah.
their stocks are going to be limited as well. So it's nice to have your own little stockpile if you're going to be replacing
It's
things.
not a bad idea, especially if you're racing commonly on gravel or anything like that, to have a kit of the stuff that wears out on a bike. A little, I don't know, a first aid kit in your car of stuff that, pads, chains, tires, tubes, things like that. That, hey, who knows? Something could happen. At least I won't be completely screwed.
Mm-hmm.
So, but when you get to winter bike maintenance, there are a couple things that I think everyone can do to any bike that you ride in the winter that's going to extend the longevity of your bike and will increase the enjoyment of your bike riding experience for sure. The first thing that I would say, and then Andrew, I'll hand it over to you for what you think. But the first thing I'd say is grease your parts.
Mm-hmm.
This is your chain. This is anywhere where your parts come into contact with each other, like seat post. You wouldn't think like you'd have to grease that, but then when I say grease it, I'm saying don't like make it sloppy, but just a very, very thin little bit of grease around that seat post is going to keep it from seizing when you have to remove it later.
Right.
All of your bolts, like in your crankshafts and things like that, a very thin layer of grease that's going to keep that salt and moisture and stuff out of there.
Right.
And
pedals,
to
with respect to this too, when you're talking about greasing too, you're not talking about chain lube. You're talking about
no, I'm talking
grease.
about like bicycle grease,
right?
Especially like you want to find something that like the what's it? Park I know makes one.
Mm-hmm. I like the Park one because it's a very nice, pretty color.
It is. Phil Wood makes some very nice waterproof grease, and look for waterproof. That's key. So yeah, like, and it's not a lot of grease. You're not having to slop grease on things. It's just a very thin layer, and that just helps everything keep from seizing when it's subject to salt and moisture and cold weather, that sort of thing.
Right. Like one really good example of this, aside from the more obvious ones that are parts in your bike, is that I've experienced recently, and even the amount of grease that I used wasn't satisfactory enough to keep them from seizing. But cleat bolts.
Oh, hey, yeah,
is a good spot to apply. Really, actually, maybe one of the more important ones, because it is going to be subject to a lot of corrosion due to the dirt and mud and salt that you're going to be walking through in the winter. And I put too much grease in there, and I wiped off the excess as it was purged by putting the screws in. But it helped in some cases. In one case, it just too much salt basically was my problem. But man, if you've never had to try to take off the bolt from your cleats, like something like an SPD or a Crank Brothers cleat, those things can seize like a mother. And I've had to even drill out bolts before just because they were just so locked in there, and I stripped the screws just trying to crank them out. So
and that's what you want to avoid, because it's a big issue and a big problem, and it can destroy your otherwise perfectly good shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely, that's a good call, Andrew. That's a very good call. I hadn't actually thought of that because I don't often ride with cleats in the winter, but it's actually probably not a bad idea even for summer, just for dust and all that other crap.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty rare really that you're going to be taking your cleats off, but there have been times when I have, and mainly to change out like worn SPD or Crank Brothers cleats, because that does happen. But man, once you get to that point of wanting to change one, you can't. Either you're going to take the drill out, or you're going to
take the shoe into the shop and hope that they can do it. Yeah.
Exactly.
So like make sure you're just greasing all of your points that run into corrosion causing entities like salt and water and that sort of thing. So pedals, bottom bracket areas, your hubs. If you're really ambitious and you want to grease your own hubs, that's not a bad idea. Go for it. basically anything that comes into contact with that liquid is not going to be a bad idea to think about, like, can it benefit from a layer of grease before I put it back together?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Andrew? What's your next tip for winter bike maintenance?
Well, one of the things that winter bike maintenance has taught me sort of is, so far this season especially, is that by and large, I have always been kind of afraid of touching things on my bike. Over the last, coming on 2 years now of, really active riding, I knew that lubing your chain was important. When I first started riding, I'm like, oh yeah, you're supposed to lube your chain. And I was, like I think a lot of beginning riders who get a bike did not know what that really meant. And so I would, occasionally when it got really, really loud, start putting lube on it, which is, terrible. Now I lube, at least once a week. In the wintertime, frankly, daily. You should be lubing your chain, just because of the fact that in the winter, you're picking up so much grit and grime. And if I, like for instance, my cross bike, every single, this past week over the holidays, I did 2 really big rides out to my family's house, which is like 130 miles away. And, during both of those rides, one was raining and the other was snowing. At the end of the day, I'd put the bike in the garage and it'd be covered in muck and grime and everything. And I'd go back out the next day and you'd already see rust on the chain and the cassette, and the damn thing wouldn't even spin. And, in particular, the bike I rode last winter, I was not at all into keeping it maintained, partially because I didn't have my own bike maintenance space. And so it was a matter of putting it out in my in-laws garage, and it was freezing out. And so I wasn't going to go out there with, bare hands and lube the chain. And so now that thing is sitting behind me completely caked in rust. And someday I'm going to have to probably replace all those parts. But so lube your chain, frequently. And if you've never done this before, if you're kind of afraid of what that means, really all it means is, first, you need 2 things. You need chain lube, and then you need a towel. And the first thing you should be doing is wiping the chain clean of any debris. Just basically, it means hold the chain in your hand in the towel, and then just spin the pedals either backwards, or if you've got a stand or something like that, forwards. Yep. And the idea is to rub away the existing grit and grime and excess grease, the stuff that's now turned black. Then apply some lube, and you don't need to apply a ton, just a few, even a drop per chain link really is plenty. What I like to do is just sort of hold the nozzle over the chain and just kind of apply steady pressure and just give the pedals a couple spins so you get a few revolutions, and then you're done. Yep. Let it air dry a little bit, and then repeat the wiping off process. And that's all you got to do to lube your chain. And, it doesn't take a lot of lube, so it's not like you're going to be burning through a ton. So you can probably buy one small 4-ounce bottle, and that's going to last you for, a month or 2.
At least. If not more. Yeah.
And, like the stuff I've been using lately, which is called TriFlow, I think a 4-ounce bottle is something like $4 or something. So we're not talking a huge expense here, and it really prolongs the life of your parts.
Especially your chain, and chains aren't cheap. It's I don't know about you, Andrew, but I do not like resizing a new chain. It's not very fun.
That's one of the things I've never done.
Oh, okay. Well, it's not very fun because you're never, if you have the existing chain that was on there and that worked, you can always just line up how many links, and then you're good.
Right.
But like when I replaced the chain on my fat bike, I went to a 45 North willful neglect chain, and had changed so much stuff with chain rings and that sort of thing. I kind of went with the method that is prescribed in the Park Tools blog, and they have a system that you can use. There's 3 different systems actually for sizing a chain. You can either do you do biggest chain ring to biggest gear in your cassette, add 2 links, there you go. That's what it is. Or there's actually a mathematical version where you can actually go through and, like, this is the length of my chain stays. This is, and then there's a bunch of science and stuff.
Sure.
I'm not that dude. So I wrap it around here, and I don't think I got it quite right. I think it's a little small.
So why can't you just count the links on the old chain?
Because I changed so much stuff with my chain ring size.
Oh, I see. Okay. Sure.
Because I had gone from, 22 to 30 to 38 to 30, all over the place.
So you basically need to restart from scratch.
Basically, yeah. I think I got a little too small, but that's the nice thing about power links on a chain is that I can add a couple links if I need to, because I still have some links from the chain. I can add a couple links, put in another power link, and be good to go. So that'll be great. But yeah, I mean, chain maintenance is probably one of the biggest things in the winter that's really going to improve your ride, because it is one of the places that's going to take the most abuse.
Mm-hmm. And the reason too, it's important, not just from like a noise standpoint and keeping rust off, but I just brought my bike into the store just this weekend because I broke a spoke nipple. And so this is one of those things that I've yet to learn how to do myself. And I kind of don't really want to know how to do it because, retruing a wheel is a finicky process that someone like me, who is insane when it comes to like trying to get things perfect, it would drive me up the wall.
I would actually say don't do it.
Exactly.
Because
let the professionals do it.
I've had to true wheels before, and I hate it. I hate it. It's not fun. You take it to your local bike shop. What is it, like $15?
$15, yeah.
Yeah.
And
they're
so
going to
quick.
do it in a very quick period of time, and then it's done right. You don't have to worry about it. Believe me, it's going to take you more than an hour to do it yourself.
You need to buy a truing stand and just
take it to your bike shop. Let them do it.
Yeah.
Don't
go have a beer and calm down, and
exactly.
Be okay.
There you go. See, that is the perfect afternoon. You take your bike wheel, you go to your bike shop, drop it off, say, I'm going to be back in an hour or two, go to your bar, have a beer, come back.
Right.
There you go. True wheel.
Right.
Don't have to think about it. Back on the bike, back on the ride.
Exactly.
There you go. Yeah.
But so while I was there dropping my bike off, Aaron at the shop was looking at my big chain ring, and he goes, "Man, do you spend a lot of time in this thing?" And I'm like, well, 50-50, I guess. If I'm road riding it, then yeah, I do. But if I'm cross racing, I'm usually in the small ring. He's like, this thing's really worn. And so he pulls out his chain measuring tool. He's like, holy crap, man, your chain's spent. And that is a position you do not want to be in. And what is interesting about this particular chain is that I bought it somewhere in the middle of cross racing season, or the early part of cross racing season. So something like September. So it's kind of had a shockingly short life. But the reason for that is I've been running it through the ringer in terms of the conditions with sand and mud. And so it's really not too surprising the amount of wear that it has on it. But the reason why you don't want to get to that position is because not only is the chain experiencing a lot of wear, which is shortening the life of the chain, but if you're not taking care of the chain, it's going to be degrading all of the parts that it comes into contact with.
Yeah, your chain rings are going to suffer, your cassette's going to suffer,
right.
And then
and
the next thing you know,
you think a chain's expensive,
yeah.
Start buying those things. I mean, a cassette, that's not too big a deal. You can, anywhere from $50 to $150, depending on your what kind of components you have, and if you're buying them online or something like that, or on sale. And then, chain rings. I've never bought single chain rings, and you can, I'm sure.
Yes, you can.
But
I know.
But those aren't cheap either. So you want to avoid that at all costs. And most of that can be handled by simply taking care of the lubrication of your chain.
Right.
Keeping it clean.
And that is probably the biggest tip I think I have for anyone who's riding in the winter is keep your bike clean.
Mm-hmm.
Ride your bike, go out, put it through the worst conditions you can. I mean, that's what bikes are for. Go out, they're a tool.
They're tools, not trophies.
Exactly. Go out, beat it up, have fun, be epic, have a saga, whatever you want to do. But when you get home, I mean, this is the mistake that I commonly make. And I made even last night, I was lazy after my ride. I did like 20 miles of snow riding, and I was lazy, did not take my bike out and just get the snow and crap off. It's really what you should do if you want to prolong the life of your bike as much as you can, is don't let your bike sit with moisture and snow and grime on it for longer than is absolutely necessary. So what I should have done, and I'm seriously thinking about getting, is one of these handheld blower systems that, like, you can use them for motorcycles and stuff, and they're for like blowing the water off of a motorcycle after you wash it, let's say, just to get the moisture off. I'm like, that would work great for a bike, because you could blow all of the snow and everything off of it, wipe it down, maybe with a wet rag or something like that, blow it off again, and you're good to go.
Mm-hmm.
You know, put some lube on the chain, bingo, ready for your next ride. Now, obviously, I'm not going to do this every time because I'm kind of a slacker.
Right.
And so, but even if you do that, like maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, I don't know, you know, go through your bike, get all the crap off of it, start fresh. That's going to help a lot.
Yeah. And I've really kind of struggled with this too, because I too, like, especially after a long ride, you get in, the last thing you want to do, especially in the winter, is go stand out in the cold with some water and try to wash your bike off.
What I want to, when I get done with a long ride, is I want a beer and I want a shower.
Exactly.
Preferably at the same time.
At the same time, right? Hashtag shower beer.
There you go. Shower beer is the best thing.
It is the best. But
cyclist's best friend.
In spite of that, it is so much easier to clean your bike every single, you know, time it gets gunked up than it is to, you know, wait a couple of weeks and you know, because you're going to get accumulated mud. It's going to get stuck into all kinds of weird places. You know, rusty chains. You just,
that's where you end up with seized components.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my typical strategy, since there's no hose right now, you know, hooked up because it's winter, is just I got a really big bucket that go fill it in the kitchen sink with some hot water. No soap, just water, because all I'm looking to do is to clean off all the grime, and I just dump a few bucketfuls over the bike, and it's really, I mean, it's not the thing I need to, because I was out this weekend for a quick ride around the city, and it was still pretty warm. It hadn't dumped the snow that we just got, and so I actually, since my cross bike was in the shop, I took my racing bike out there. And, you know, being it's carbon and fancy and all that stuff, I wanted to clean it immediately. And so the first thing I did was just got a couple of buckets of hot water and just dumping those things on there. Everything just, you know, washed off right away because it was fresh. It wasn't caked on there. And I'll probably still, you know, sometime tonight go with a spray bottle of some like cleaner stuff and just do a mopping down of, you know, just the fine cleaning of it, so there's no salt residue and that sort of stuff. But it's so much easier if you just take care of it right away. It'll take, you know, 10 minutes and then you're done.
You know, and if you're really, really pro, I'd seen this thing a while back, and I'll mention it here now, is that there's a company, I'm sure there's a couple of companies here, but they make a portable bike pressure washer that actually has its own tank of water and everything. And you just fill it up, and it has an internal rechargeable battery and everything.
Sure.
And, you know, you can wash your bike wherever you want.
Yeah.
And no cords or anything. You basically,
sure.
And, you know, if you do a lot of riding like this and you're experiencing a lot of problems with, you know, component failure due to grime and stuff, it's not a bad investment. It'll pay itself off, you know, in a short period of time.
Yeah. The one thing people will caution about like pressure washers is that, you know, you see people like pro cross racers getting their bikes pressure washed every other lap or every lap. It's not really something you want to be careful if you're going to do that, because you don't want to be pressure washing like your bottom bracket area or your hubs, because, you know, these people who are doing it frequently have those things rebuilt basically before every single race. And if you're pressure washing, you know, grime, it's going to work its way into your bottom bracket and bad things will happen. So,
yeah, exactly.
So anytime you're using water with your bike, you kind of want to, I mean, I don't worry about dumping a bucket of water on my bike anywhere near the bottom bracket, because, you know, that's happening on the road anyway. And I'm just cleaning it off. So I don't think that's a big deal, but I would be a little more cautious pressure washing, you know, your cassettes and your bottom bracket areas.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. That's definitely. You don't want to force water
grime into those hubs.
That's not a great idea.
Yeah.
But just to get everything off of the frame and whatnot, it's something to think about.
Right. So, right. So one of the things I really like too about this bike maintenance thing, especially in the winter, is that because I have to do it so much, I've sort of lost some of the fear that I have about, you know, taking apart the bike and trying to put it back together. Because, you know, as I said, sort of when we started talking about chain lubing, you know, I just didn't do a lot, and I didn't know how to put things back together once I took them apart. And it wasn't that I didn't know how to do it, because I knew if I took it apart, I could put it back together. But it's just like, I don't want to mess with it. It's working right now. I don't want it to not work when I'm done. And so, but with winter riding, and especially after our river bottoms ride, things weren't working. And so it was going to be a matter of either me figuring out how to fix it or taking it to the damn bike shop every time, which is a fine thing to do, but that takes a lot of time. and so I've gotten brave. And one of the problems I was having, including not having brakes, and so that's just a matter of changing the brake pads, is that every time I took my bike out, the rear brake lever, once it got cold, would seize. And so that's no fun because A, you don't have brakes, and B, if you try to use the brakes, they would completely lock up the back wheel, and that's no good either. So
and then you don't have any, you can't really.
It's like an emergency brake, basically. So at a certain point, I just said, screw it. I have to clean out the calipers. And if you've ever had disc brakes, at least in my experience, my limited experience in owning them so far, they can be really fussy. They will be beautiful and they'll stop you perfectly and make no noise for about 5 minutes, and all of a sudden they're making noise, and they're a pain in the ass. And so I've always found them to be irritating. But because of my need to constantly be cleaning them and tuning them up with winter, I've gotten a little bit better with doing this. And so I said, screw it. I'll take the calipers off, try to dismantle them. I dismantled them as far as I could because there's like a nut on there that I couldn't figure out how to get off because I didn't have the right tool. Clean them out with water, and I think I used a little bit of rubbing alcohol too. Mm-hmm. Still having the problem. So I even went so far as to clean out or take off one of the brake cable housings, and I lubed that or cleaned that in the sink and lubed it up, put it all back together, and magically it works again.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing needs to happen on my rear cassette derailleur cable. Mm-hmm. That I need to take that apart because I'm sure there's a bunch of grime in there because it's getting pretty hard to shift.
Right.
So yeah.
And the moral of the story really is that it wasn't that hard. And you know what? We have this wonderful thing right now called YouTube and the internet.
And there are hundreds of people out there.
Yeah, so many instructional videos for how to take apart things and put them back together. So if you just say, in my case, I was looking for Avid BB5 disassembly, and so I found a video that covered a similar setup to what I had, and it's like, oh, okay, that's no big deal. And they walked through what parts need to be cleaned and that sort of thing. And in the case of my dismantling the brake cable housing, I'm a little bit lucky in the sense that my cables are run internally, but then the internal parts of the case or the cable rather through the bike frame have their own separate piece of housing. And so I was just able to leave the cabling in place and just pull the housing entirely out, clean it out, and then thread it back in. But it's just, these are things that like you think like, oh, fuck, it's going to be miserable to take these things apart and put them back together, but it's really not that bad. And then the other thing that people are super afraid of especially with disc brakes is like, how do I possibly realign these things?
It's trial and error.
It's trial and error, but here's what I did. Google the BB5 alignment business card method.
Yeah, it's perfect.
And it's magic. And I even brought my bike into the shop, and Scott at the shop's like, did you realign your brake calipers in the rear? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, these are perfect. I was like, yes.
Yeah. I
have achieved.
The business card method is gold.
It's gold.
And I'm not even going to try and explain it. Watch the video. It's so easy. You'll watch it and you'll be like, well, duh.
Yeah. And it's one of those things like, when I first got the disc brakes, I was like, I don't even know how to try to adjust these. And just by nature of wanting them to not make noise and things like that, I've just tried goofing around with it. And what's the worst thing that's really going to happen? You have to take it into the shop and
there'll be a little bit of rub and it'll annoy you or right. The problem that I have with my brake systems, and this might be a whole thing for another episode in the future, is I personally like my brakes to be super touchy. Sure. As in, like, if I'm touching the brake lever and even remotely pushing on it, I want some braking.
Right.
I don't want to yank on them just to get something. I want just like, I like having that very gradual, now it's touching, now it's stopped, that sort of thing. And it's hard to get that. It's very hard. The business card method is easily the best place in the world to start. I start with that method. Once again, I'm not going to try and explain it. It's just you need to see it. Watch the video. Just look it up. You'll find it. but it's a great place to start, and then you can fine tune to your riding style from there. It's easy to do. A lot of people are going to discover that when they do this method, when you're realigning your brakes, that sort of thing, after wear and tear, your rotor isn't completely true. It has some rub that you'll spin the wheel and you hear in certain areas because the rotor is a little bit off. That goes away over time. It wears the pads in correctly and whatnot. So the problem for someone like you and I, Andrew, who tend to be a little bit perfectionist on getting our bikes set up the way we like it, is that you can easily spend more time maintaining your bike than riding it. That's one thing that I do not want to have people to believe. Is that maintenance is especially in winter is such a time-consuming thing that you're going to spend all your time doing. I want to take my bike out in the winter. Right. And it's not that bad. We've made it kind of sound like, oh man, there's all this stuff to do. It's get out.
Say that again.
Okay. It's more important that you get out, ride your bike, enjoy the weather that we have, and use that tool that you have, because honestly, your bike's not doing you any good in the garage, perfectly maintained. Get it out there, ride your bike. That's all. I think that's the best way to end up. The bike maintenance question for the winter is that take reasonable care of it, but make sure you ride it rather than anything. So. There you go.
That's for sure. And again, don't be afraid to play with it. And the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to have to bring it into the shop and say, "Guys, help!" And they're going to help you, because that's what they're great at.
And that's what your local bike shop is for.
Exactly. So yeah, but seriously, just play with the damn thing, because I've learned so much in the last really month of winter bike riding about how my bike works and how I can fine tune things the way that they maybe used to be when I first got the bike, or when it's come fresh from being tuned up at the shop. That it's just like, why did I spend all this time goofing around not having it just perfect, and when it was so easy to do. So easy. So don't be afraid of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Andrew, we got emails.
We did.
We got an email that was like intensely written. Like it's like a novel. It's a wonderful email, but we haven't gotten permission yet to talk about it on the show.
We actually have just now, but
did we?
Just now we did.
All right, maybe let's save it for next.
Save it for in the next episode, I think, so we can.
Yeah. All right, that sounds good.
We can fit it in with a more appropriate topic, perhaps. So,
that's a good idea.
Yes.
So upcoming topics that we are going to be aiming for. I am looking at getting a heart rate monitor. So that's coming up. We're going to talk about heart rate, I think.
Heart rate, and I think maybe training
levels and things like that. Because I also, which we will talk about in the upcoming future, I did a Sufferfest video. And you know what? Yes. Once you're there, you can never leave.
That's right. Yeah. And in terms of training, I've recently signed up for a 12-week training session at the local studio, The Fix here, and I'll be riding on the rollers, and it's very similar to doing things like Sufferfest videos, but it's going to be more of a structured environment, and so it'll be interesting to talk about what kind of things to expect for getting into going to a place like that, but also just what are your sort of metrics and goals and strategies for training in the wintertime, because it's not, let's be honest, it's not fun to train in the wintertime when you're on a trainer.
Well, let's just say this: it's not fun to train.
It's not fun to
really train.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is another topic that is going to come up pretty soon, because it's going to affect my life anyway. Is we're going to be talking diet, and we're going to be talking about what to eat, what not to eat, and obviously there will be some leeway as to what to eat, what not to eat, but some good guidelines for your training to get ready for the road season coming up in a few short months. So here we go. Yeah. A lot of heavy topics that are going to make me feel bad. I'll be like, oh, I know what to do, but I'm not doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that's my goal for this winter, is to actually do them. So we'll see how that goes. But if you have a topic you would like to talk to us about, you have a myriad of options to send us your ideas. First one would be email. Please send your emails to the Super Number One Cast at, I'm sorry, not the Super Number One Cast, but Super Number One Cast at gmail.com. We appreciate your emails. Any comments, questions, topic ideas, criticisms, whatever, just send them over. We love to hear it. Andrew, give us another one.
Yeah, you can. One thing you should definitely do is check out our Facebook page. Just go to Facebook and search Super Number One Cycling. You'll find us there. We post photos there for this particular episode. Once it gets released, I'll include some pictures of our River Bottoms ride, and I'm also hoping to post a kind of a, when I just get unlazy, a bunch of other pictures from just racing season this last year. Hopefully before the new year, we'll maybe do like a non-Facebook but Facebook retrospective of what the last year has been like for Kevin and I cycling.
Yeah. So you right now you can go there right now and see a picture of me with Beardsicles for the first time this winter. Right. It's pretty good.
Exactly. So that's sort of where Kevin's been doing a great job of kind of turning that into our blog. And I think as time goes on, we'll get better and better at putting new stuff up there. Stuff to look at in between the episode release cycle. So that's Absolutely. A great place. The other place to keep in constant contact with us would be on Twitter. You can reach Kevin at the4tree, and you can reach me at the nth Andrew. And we do a lot of tweeting there. And also, of course, the show page itself, or the show Twitter feed is Super Number One. But I highly recommend you check out our individual feeds because that's where we really do most of our tweeting. So
yeah, especially if you want to, ask questions about racing, send them to Andrew. If you want to ask questions about, being slow in the snow, send them to me. So
whatever.
It works. Whatever your poison is.
Exactly.
We can make that happen.
Yeah.
And most importantly, please just go to our the iTunes page, search for Super Number One Cycling or just Super Number One. It comes up. And leave us a review. We'd really greatly appreciate to hear what you guys think of the show, where we can improve, where we can change, I don't know, format, tempo, style, something. Anyway, anything to make the show better, we are open to hear it. And, let us know what you think. Honestly, leave us a couple stars. We'd greatly appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. More than a couple would be even better.
Yeah, I'd actually prefer like two couples plus one.
Yes,
would
exactly.
Be great.
Exactly.
Yeah. Also, I forgot to mention, go to our Facebook page and please like the Facebook page.
Yes.
We've been getting a lot more likes lately, and I'm
almost to 100.
Excited.
Oh my God!
I know. I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
So tell your friends if they are into cycling and they like to hear podcasts that are sometimes mostly about cycling. But send them our way. We'd be glad to have them. So. Well, I think that is the end of this episode. I can't think of anything else to say except for get out there and ride.
Exactly. Enjoy the weather, even if it's miserable, because
there is sun today.
There's
get out
sun
in
today
the
for
sun.
us. It's beautiful. I wish I had a bike that I could handle the snow right now. That wasn't covered in rust. But
I have a solution.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and I'm not shaving my legs for it. So.
Well, that's your one option. But seriously, get out there. It's wintertime, and there are solutions to any weather problem that you may find. And if it's raining, riding in the rain can be a lot of fun. If it's snowing, riding the snow can be a lot of fun. So it's just a matter of perspective and also proper clothing.
And always remember, I think it was Velomati or whatever, they have the list of the rules for cycling. And I believe it's rule number 9 that if you're riding in bad weather, you are badass.
That's right. So this is your chance to, be a badass.
Be that guy.
Exactly.
Or gal.
Exactly.
So
get out there. And with that, I will say good afternoon, because it's now afternoon.
It's crazy.
See you guys later.
Yep. Later.